Imagine this: a Roman centurion, helmet dented like a crushed skull, face caked in Mesopotamian dust the color of dried blood, stands on a ridge in 117 AD. The sun hangs low, turning the sky into a furnace of orange and crimson. Behind him, the Tigris River glints like a blade fresh from the forge, its waters carrying the reflections of burning siege towers. Ahead, Trajan's crimson banners flutter triumphantly over the captured Persian capital of Ctesiphon, once the glittering jewel of the Parthian Empire, now a smoldering trophy. The empire is unstoppable. Gaul fell in a single decade under Caesar's relentless campaigns. Carthage was razed and salted into eternal legend. The entire Mediterranean Sea has become a Roman lake, patrolled by triremes flying the eagle standard. Then the order comes from Rome. Sharp, cold, final. Burn the siege towers, load the wounded onto carts, march home. Abandon it all. He drops his pilum into the hot sand. The iron tip buries itself like a grave marker. His brother died taking that city, bled out on the palace steps while Parthian archers rained arrows from the rooftops. For what? That moment, raw, furious, heartbreaking, is the first visible crack in Rome's iron soul. The empire that crucified Spartacus's rebel army along the entire length of the Appian Way, that turned the Rhine into a militarized frontier, that built soaring aqueducts in Hispania and marble temples in Syria, suddenly stops dead, not because it ran out of swords or soldiers, not because it feared any foreign king or barbarian horde, but because somewhere in the cool marble halls of the Palatine, a calculator colder than any gladius whispered into the emperor's ear, "The price is too high." Tonight, we rip open that ancient wound and peer inside. We'll stand in the Teutoburg forest where Germanic ghosts still scream through the twisted oaks, their voices echoing in the wind. We'll taste the thick frankincense smoke of Arabia Felix that cost more Roman lives than it was ever worth. We'll watch Emperor Septimius Severus cough blood into a muddy Scottish bog, cursing the gods for a hollow victory that killed him. And we'll ask the question that haunts every fallen empire, every overreaching civilization. When you can take the world, why do you leave half of it behind? This is not a dry history lesson recited from dusty textbooks. This is an autopsy of ambition, cold, clinical, and unflinching. Strap on your caligy, polish your scutum. The legions are marching one last time. The map is bleeding, and the story begins now. The centurion's pilum rusts in the sand. The banners burn. The empire pauses. And the world changes forever. Rome was never a charity. It was a corporation with swords, shields, and an insatiable appetite for profit. Every conquest had to pay dividends: slaves to work the massive latifundia estates, grain to feed the Annona public distribution system in the city, gold and silver to fill the imperial mint and fund the next campaign. The Republic's political ladder, the cursus honorum, was a brutal meritocracy that demanded military success as its entry fee. A consul without a triumph was a political nobody, destined for obscurity. Pompey the Great returned from the east in 61 BC with a staggering 300 million sesterces, enough cold, hard cash to fund the entire Roman state for a full year. Julius Caesar's 8-year Gallic Wars not only added vast new territories, but bankrolled his civil war against Pompey and left him with over 50,000 pounds of plundered gold. The system incentivized expansion, but only when the math worked in Rome's favor. A new province had to yield far more in annual taxes, resources, and manpower than it cost in blood, bronze weapons, and bureaucratic administration. By the time Augustus seized absolute power in 27 BC and declared himself the first emperor, the empire already spanned 3 continents. boasted over 5,000 miles of paved military roads, and commanded a tax base so vast that a single rebellion could bankrupt a lesser kingdom in weeks. The machine still roared with the thunder of marching legions, the creak of supply wagons, the clash of gladi on scuta, but it was learning the bitter taste of restraint. The Senate debated endlessly in the Curia about the costs of distant wars. The imperial accountants calculated costs down to the last sestertius, weighing tribute against garrison expenses. Governors sent reports from frontier provinces pleading for more troops or threatening revolt if taxes rose higher. The engine of conquest was powerful, but it was not infinite. It required fuel: gold, grain, slaves, political capital. And fuel was running low in the far corners of the world. The Republic had expanded through ambition. The Empire would survive through calculation. The machine still roared, but it was learning to idle, to wait, to choose. The hunger was still there, but it was tempered now by wisdom. The glory was still sought, but only when the profit was assured. The Republican hunger had built an empire. The imperial wisdom would preserve it. East of the Euphrates River lay Rome's mirror image, Persia. First the Parthians, then the Sassanids, empires as ancient, as proud, and as viciously effective as Rome itself. Their elite cataphract cavalry wore scale armor from the rider's head to the horse's hoof. Their horse archers could loose volleys of arrows while galloping backward at full speed, the infamous Parthian shot that turned retreat into a deadly weapon. In 53 BC, the triumvir Marcus Crassus learned this lesson the hard way at the Battle of Carrhae. 20,000 Roman legionaries marched confidently into the desert. Only 10,000 crawled out alive, dehydrated and defeated. The rest became gruesome lawn ornaments for Parthian nobles, their severed heads mounted on pikes along the royal road. Emperor Trajan tried again in 116 AD with far greater success. His legion stormed across the Euphrates, captured the Parthian capital of Ctesiphon, and pushed all the way to the Persian Gulf, where Trajan reportedly bathed in the warm waters and declared Mesopotamia a new Roman province. Then the revolts began, spontaneous, widespread, unstoppable. Every village became a hidden fortress, every caravan a supply line for guerrilla rebellion. Within a single year, Emperor Hadrian ordered a full evacuation. The message was brutal and unambiguous. Persia wasn't a prize to be claimed. It was a peer empire. Rome could wound it deeply, bleed it for decades, but never fully own it. The Eastern Wall was not built of stone or brick. It was built of mutual respect, endless blood, national pride, and unbreakable military will on both sides. The Parthian shot was more than a tactic, it was a symbol. A reminder that some enemies could not be conquered, only contained. The Euphrates became the line. The border held. The empires stared across the river for centuries, trading blows but never breaking through. This was not defeat. This was equilibrium. The unbreakable spine of Persia had met the iron will of Rome, and neither blinked. Armenia sat precariously between the two superpowers, like a bone tossed between starving wolves. Control it, and you controlled the northern artery of the Silk Road, the lucrative trade route carrying silk, spices, and ideas from China to the Mediterranean. Rome installed puppet kings loyal to the emperor. Persia responded by poisoning them at state banquets or assassinating them in their sleep. The cycle of installation, betrayal, and retaliation lasted 6 full centuries. In 66 AD, Emperor Nero staged one of the most elaborate political theater pieces in Roman history. He crowned King Tiridates III of Armenia in the Roman Forum itself, draping him in golden chains as a symbol of submission, declaring it a triumph without a single battle. 3 years later, Parthian cavalry raided the Armenian border and burned the coronation gifts in a public display of contempt. The frontier became a giant chessboard of client states, buffer zones, and elaborate assassination plots. Neither side could hold the board without bleeding out financially and militarily. The cost wasn't just the loss of legions in border skirmishes. It was the slow erosion of imperial prestige every time a Roman-backed king was dragged in chains through the streets of Ctesiphon as a Parthian trophy. Armenia was never truly conquered by either empire. It was managed through diplomacy, bribery, and perpetual stalemate, a 600-year game of thrones played with real crowns and real poison. The Silk Road flowed through its mountains, and both empires taxed the caravans. The game was not about victory. It was about control, about influence, about survival. The poisoned banquets continued. The kings changed. The border held. Armenia remained the eternal buffer, the eternal prize, the eternal curse. South of Roman Syria lay Arabia Felix, Happy Arabia, a land Roman poets rhapsodized about in verse for its perfumed winds, exotic myrrh trees, and legendary wealth. Reality was far harsher, a furnace of endless sand dunes, tribal betrayal, and slow death by dehydration. In 26 BC, Prefect Aelius Gallus marched 10,000 legionaries and 1,000 Nabatean auxiliaries deep into the peninsula to seize control of the incense trade route. Their supposed allies deliberately led them in circles for 6 agonizing months, through waterless wadis and trackless deserts. Water rations ran out. Disease bloomed like desert flowers after rare rain. They finally reached the city of Marib, sacked it in a desperate frenzy, then limped home with only 11 survivors out of the original force. Rome retained control of Red Sea ports for trade but annexed nothing inland. The desert itself became an impenetrable wall. Caravan trade became the door. Frankincense and myrrh continued to flow north by ship and camel train. Why conquer a wasteland when you could simply buy its soul through commerce? The expedition became a cautionary tale whispered in legionary camps, a graveyard of Roman ambition and a stark lesson in the limits of military power against nature itself. The desert swallowed the legions. The trade continued. The border held. The lesson was learned. The Nabatean kingdom, famous for Petra's rose-red city carved into sheer cliff faces, masters of the incense caravan routes, became a Roman client state in 62 BC. For over a century, they paid regular tribute in spices and gold while maintaining internal autonomy and keeping the southern trade routes secure. When King Rabelais died in 106 AD without a clear heir, Emperor Trajan pounced with surgical precision. No war, no prolonged siege, just swift annexation. Provincia Arabia Petraea was born overnight. The Via Nova Traiana, a new Roman road, was constructed linking Basra to the Gulf of Aqaba. Roman legions garrisoned key frontier outposts, and Petra's grand theaters soon echoed with Latin oratory. But this was the absolute limit of expansion. Beyond lay the Hejaz, empty, hostile, and utterly profitless desert. Rome secured the vital trade hub without swallowing the endless wasteland around it. A calculated gain, a border drawn permanently in sand. The client became the province. The trade flowed. The empire grew wiser. North of the Rhine River lay Germania Magna, an endless expanse of ancient oak forests, treacherous peat bogs, and fierce tribes who fought like cornered wolves. Julius Caesar crossed the river twice for dramatic show, but never intended permanent conquest. Emperor Augustus dreamed of turning it into a province. Then came 9 AD. Governor Publius Quinctilius Varus marched 3 full legions, 17,000 professional soldiers, deep into the Teutoburg forest on a routine punitive expedition. Arminius, a Roman-trained chieftain of the Cherushi tribe, secretly united the Germanic clans. Torrential rain turned forest paths to sucking mud. Trees provided perfect cover for ambushes. Over 3 brutal days, the Romans were systematically hacked apart in the undergrowth. Golden Eagle standards were captured. Varus fell on his own sword in despair. Emperor Augustus, upon hearing the news in Rome, reportedly wandered the palace at night screaming, "Quintilivare, legiones reda! Give me back my legions!" The Rhine River became the permanent border. Rome never attempted full conquest again. The forest won. The legions lost. The dream died in the mud. The border held. The lesson was learned. From the Rhine to the upper Danube, Rome constructed the Limes Germanicus, a 550-kilometer chain of wooden palisades, stone watchtowers, and earthen forts. This was not a line for conquest, but for containment. Germanic raids were a constant drip of blood across the frontier. Small war bands slipping through to burn farms and carry off slaves. The legions held the line with grim determination, but the cost was staggering in manpower and treasure. A single full-scale campaign into the forests could empty the imperial treasury for years. The tribes had no centralized cities to tax, no paved roads to loot, no infrastructure to exploit. Just endless dark forest and endless guerrilla war. Rome chose defense over delusion. The Limes was not a frontier of glory. It was a frontier of fear, a wall against the unknown chaos beyond civilization. The border held. The raids continued. The empire survived. Roman Britain was fully conquered by 43 AD under Emperor Claudius. The north, modern Scotland, known then as Caledonia, was another story entirely. In 83 AD, Governor Agricola won a decisive victory at Mons Graupius against the Caledonian tribes, then promptly withdrew south. Emperor Hadrian built his famous 73-mile wall in 122 AD to mark the limit. The Antonine Wall was pushed further north in 142 AD, but abandoned after only 20 years. In 208 AD, Emperor Septimius Severus, aging and ill, marched 50,000 men into the highlands for a final push. Guerrilla war erupted immediately. Supply lines were cut by hit-and-run raids. Disease spread through the camps like wildfire. Severus died in York in 211 AD, coughing blood into his purple cloak, cursing the gods for a victory that killed him. His son Caracalla burned the supply camps and marched south. The wall held. The north stayed free. Caledonia was never conquered. It was merely survived. The border held. The lesson was learned. By the 4th century AD, the Picts, painted warriors from beyond Hadrian's Wall, raided Roman Britain at will, slipping through gaps in the defenses like smoke. Rome's response shifted from conquest to containment, bribes, diplomacy, and occasional punitive strikes. The empire was bleeding on every frontier simultaneously. Britain's tin mines and grain fields simply weren't worth the escalating cost in legions and gold. When the last Roman legions were withdrawn in 410 AD to defend Italy itself, Hadrian's Wall was already a crumbling ruin overgrown with moss. Caledonia never bowed to the eagle. The Picts danced on the stones of abandoned forts. Rome's northern dream ended not with a bang, but with a quiet, ignominious silence. The border held. The empire withdrew. The lesson was final. Rome's true African crown jewel was Egypt, the empire's breadbasket, gold mine, and the gift of the Nile River. South of Egypt lay the vast Sahara Desert. Beyond that, the Kingdom of Kush, the Garamantes Confederation, and the Sahel trade zones. In 24 BC, Queen Amanirenas of Kush launched a bold raid on Aswan with her one-eyed warrior elite. Roman prefect Petronius counter-invaded, sacked the Kushite capital of Napata, and enslaved thousands. Then he accepted peace terms and withdrew. Trade resumed immediately. Gold, ivory, exotic animals, and slaves flowed north along established caravan routes. No new provinces were needed. The desert itself was cheaper and more effective than any garrison. Africa was not conquered beyond Egypt. It was harvested through commerce and occasional shows of force. The border held. The trade flowed. The empire profited. The Garamantes, fierce Saharan chariot lords who controlled underground irrigation canals called fogaras, raided Roman North Africa with impunity. In 70 AD, Legate Valerius Festus led a lightning strike on their capital Garama deep in the desert. The city was looted, wells poisoned, and the Garamantes humbled. Then the Romans left. No occupation. No garrison. Roman coins and pottery have been found as far south as Lake Chad, but no eagle standards were ever planted. Trade, not territory, was the ultimate goal. The raid was a warning shot, a flex of muscle, a line drawn permanently in the sand. The border held. The trade continued. The empire stayed profitable. In 61 AD, Emperor Nero, obsessed with spectacle, glory, and the mysteries of the unknown, dispatched 2 battle-hardened centurions, along with a small escort of Praetorian guards, Egyptian navigators, and local guides, on one of the most audacious exploratory expeditions in Roman history. Their dual mission: ascend the Nile River beyond the known world, locate its mythical source, and conduct a full military assessment of the Kingdom of Kush for potential conquest. They departed from Aswan under a blazing noon sun, sailing past the majestic temples of Philae, where the river cataracts roared like enraged lions. For weeks they pressed southward, past the island city of Meroe with its forest of black pyramids and glowing iron forges that produced weapons rivaling Roman steel. Local informants spoke in hushed tones of a great swamp far ahead, a place where the river dissolved into the sky and the earth itself became water. Then they reached it, the Sud. A living, breathing labyrinth of papyrus reeds taller than a mounted cavalryman. Narrow channels twisted and vanished without warning. Islands of floating vegetation shifted overnight like drifting continents. The air was thick with choking humidity and buzzing with mosquitoes the size of sparrows. Fever struck the expedition like a silent assassin. Malaria, dysentery, the invisible killers of the tropics. Men began hallucinating in the oppressive heat. Some saw golden cities shimmering in the haze. Others saw their own deaths staring back from the black water. The centurions pushed onward with grim determination, hacking through dense reeds with their gladii, poling fragile papyrus boats through crocodile-infested channels. Weeks blurred into months. Food supplies dwindled to hardtack and desperation. The Egyptian guides deserted under cover of night. One centurion scratched a final entry into his wax tablet. "We are not exploring the Nile. We are being swallowed by it." Finally, with half the party dead or dying, they turned back. They staggered into Alexandria months later with nothing but fever-ravaged bodies, shattered morale, and a terse report. The Nile's source was beyond human reach, and Kush, though rich in gold mines and ivory, was protected by a natural fortress no Roman legion could ever hope to breach. Nero listened to the report, nodded indifferently, and immediately pivoted to his next vanity project, digging a grand canal from the Nile to the Red Sea. The dream of conquering the African interior died with him. assassinated 7 years later in a palace coup. But the Sud remained untouched, a green wall, a silent eternal guardian. Rome never sent another expedition. The border held. The lesson was learned. By the time Emperor Trajan died in 117 AD in the port city of Selinus, his body racked with edema and his dreams of Eastern glory fading, Rome had finally mastered the brutal, unforgiving arithmetic of empire building. This was no longer the reckless expansion of the Republic, driven by personal ambition and short-term plunder. This was the cold calculus of a mature superpower. Every new province demanded an enormous upfront investment. Thousands of miles of military roads carved through hostile terrain, hundreds of stone forts and wooden watchtowers, dozens of salaried governors, tax collectors, engineers, and scribes, and, most critically, a permanent garrison of at least one full legion, often two, to maintain order. These costs escalated exponentially with distance from the Mediterranean core. Supply lines stretched thin. Grain had to be shipped from Egypt. Reinforcements marched for months. Local revolts could erupt at any moment, draining the treasury faster than any tribute could refill it. The return on investment diminished rapidly beyond the safe, profitable sea lanes of the Mediterranean. Persia, for all its glittering palaces and vast armies, offered endless glory but guaranteed perpetual war against a peer superpower with equal resources, equal pride, and an unbreakable will to resist. Arabia Felix tempted with incense and spices worth their weight in gold, but provided no sustainable tax base. No cities, no farmland, no population dense enough to justify the cost of occupation. Germania Magna offered nothing but dark, impenetrable forests, peat bogs that swallowed supply wagons whole, and fresh corpses of Roman soldiers ambushed in the undergrowth. Caledonia promised only treacherous mountain passes, constant guerrilla raids, and bogs that turned Roman discipline into slow suffocation. Sub-Saharan Africa, beyond the Sahara's burning silence, offered gold mines and ivory tusks, but only through established trade networks with Kush and the Garamantes, never through direct conquest that would bleed the empire dry. The Mediterranean basin was the true prize. Fertile river valleys, ancient urban centers like Antioch and Alexandria, connected by calm seas and efficient shipping lanes. Here, taxes flowed in reliably. Here, the legions could be fed, supplied, and rotated with minimal strain. Everything beyond the sea was a liability, high risk, low reward, endless drain. Rome stopped expanding not from weakness, not from exhaustion after centuries of war, not because the legions had grown soft or the emperors timid. Rome stopped because of wisdom. Cold, hard, pragmatic wisdom born from 2 centuries of trial and error. The empire that could conquer the world in theory chose instead to rule it efficiently in practice. Trajan's successors, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius, did not retreat out of fear. They consolidated, they fortified, they calculated, and in doing so, they ensured Rome's survival for another 3 centuries. This was the final calculus. Infinity is not profitable. The border held. The empire endured. Trajan's final map, displayed in the Roman Forum for all to see, is a monument to calculated restraint. Rome could have marched to the Indus River in the east, the Elbe in the north, the Niger in the south. It didn't, because every mile beyond the Mediterranean sea lanes cost far more in blood and gold than it could ever return. The legions that built soaring aqueducts in sunny Hispania couldn't feed themselves in the freezing Scottish highlands. The navy that ruled the calm Mediterranean couldn't supply a full-scale desert war across Arabia. The empire that crucified 6,000 rebels in a single day along the Appian Way couldn't pacify a single highland glen against guerrilla warriors who knew every rock and stream. Rome's borders were not the limit of its military power. They were the limit of its patience and economic sanity. Next time you look at a map of the Roman Empire at its peak, don't just see the red-shaded territories. See the ghosts standing at the edges, the centurion on the Tigris Ridge dropping his pilum in despair, the legionary drowning in Teutoburg mud, the emperor dying in a York tent coughing blood. They didn't fail. They were told to stop by the cold logic of empire. And in that order, in that deliberate choice to halt, lies the true genius of Rome. The empire that could take the world chose to keep it. The machine paused. The map was drawn. The story was written. Like, subscribe, join the Legion. The autopsy continues. The map is waiting. The story never ends. The empire endures.